Hi there, and welcome to another episode of How Does This Guy Get Paid to Make Things for a Living? On this episode, I'm going to talk a little bit about what I learned shooting a very short film on the iPhone 11 Pro Max with the DJI Osmo 3 gimbal system and the Moment Anamorphic lens. So let's roll the intro. I'm sure you guys are all aware of the big trend that's happening right now with adding lenses to your iPhone to give it different looks, give it depth of field, change the dimensions of the camera system in the iPhone and make it a little bit more professional, maybe modular at least. So back when the iPhone 11 Pro series came out and I got the 11 Pro Max, I decided I was going to get a Moment kit with two lenses. I went with the 1.33 anamorphic and the tele lens from Moment. Kind of a weird combination, but the anamorphic, I just felt like I had to try it out, and being a filmmaker, it really intrigued me to see what I could do with an anamorphic, especially on a smartphone when I could afford having an anamorphic versus on one of my DSLRs or one of my mirrorless cameras. I would be definitely breaking the bank for an anamorphic for my use case at least. A little while after picking up the Moment case and lens kit, I was over at a buddy's house and I played around with his DJI Osmo 3 gimbal, and I was super impressed with it. I was playing around with it with his iPhone 11 Pro, not the Pro Max, and we didn't have any lenses for it, but I could definitely see that there was potential there and it really would open up some doors in terms of iPhone cinematography. So I pulled the trigger and bought one for myself. Fast forward a month or two and here we are. Yesterday I went over to a buddy's apartment and we filmed a very short film with the iPhone 11 Pro Max, the anamorphic lens from Moment, and the DJI Osmo 3. I'd like to show you guys our short film first, so if you don't want to see that, you can skip about 50 seconds forward. And then I'd like to talk about why I realized during this short film that as a new filmmaker, I don't think that you should buy the DJI Osmo 3 or any Moment lenses for that matter.
I'm on vacation every single day, cause I love my occupation. Ay, 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 I'm on vacation. If you don't like your life, then you should go and change it. Every single, 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 every single. Hold up.
Okay, there's the short film. That's about 45, 50 seconds long. It took us about three and a half hours to put together, including shooting and editing time, and it was a really fun experience. But there were definitely a few things I noticed during this process about the Osmo, about the anamorphic lens from Moment, and about shooting video on the iPhone 11 Pro in general. Okay, so the very first thing I noticed was what I'm gonna call the Pro Max tilt. And that is if you're using a Pro Max with any sort of Moment lens on it on the DJI Osmo 3, you might notice, and I don't know why I haven't seen this all over the internet, but you might notice that your shots look a little bit sideways, just a little bit, not much. But if you look at the straight lines, they're not exactly straight, especially the horizontal lines. They're gonna be just off to a slight canter. And I think the reason for that is the motor that sits right behind the phone is not quite strong enough to handle the Pro Max with, like, say, the anamorphic lens on it. That's why you'll notice a lot of these shots actually weren't necessarily gimbal shots, or I wasn't utilizing the gimbal to its full potential, is because every time I tried to move the gimbal around quickly, it was doing some really weird things. The other thing I noticed is even though the Pro Max with an anamorphic lens on it might have been a little bit too heavy for the DJI Osmo 3, and really that's maybe just because of our circumstance. Maybe I didn't have the Osmo 3 charged up enough. There's a lot of different variables there, so I would take that with a grain of salt. But the other thing that I think matters to me a little bit more is actually the weight of the system overall. And if you've ever shot any short films or if you've ever shot any videos, you'll probably know that weight is actually your friend up to a point. When you have a heavier camera, even if you don't have a gimbal or a tripod, the heavier the camera, the more stable it will seem when you're shooting handheld, because your body is kind of just being weighed down. Your little jitters and little motions that your muscles make are going to be more or less smoothed out by the weight of the camera overall. One quick tip that I did kind of figure out throughout the day, I've watched a lot of those videos of Apple or other big production companies that are using the iPhone to shoot these videos. And one thing I noticed is a lot of the times the guys are kind of almost straight armed and they've got their camera out like this or their iPhone out like this, and they're shooting shots like that. And weirdly enough, that's actually a really good angle to keep the iPhone still and stable. I wouldn't recommend doing that with any other sort of camera, because when a camera gets heavier and you're putting it further away from your body like that, it's not gonna work so well. But with an iPhone, I think that giving it that little extra distance away from your center of gravity actually helped give it a little bit more bounce and a little less shake. If you were doing something that required a lot of motion shots, I think that the DJI Osmo 3 would really play a big part in that sort of shoot. But for something like this, where we were going for a little bit more of a cinematic feel, the motion shots weren't exactly what I was going for, and especially with that anamorphic lens on it with a little bit of tilt, I didn't want to move it around too much. Or if I did, I wanted to do it in a way where you wouldn't notice that it was tilted to the side. So overall, I would say for my use case at least, it wasn't a game changer, so to speak. Okay, so the Moment 1.33 anamorphic lens is pretty cool. It's got a really unique look to it. You can do some really interesting things with light flares. You can almost make your video look, to a degree, cinematic. Cinematic in a sense of like a Marvel movie or something like that. That being said, here's the truth about anamorphic lenses. They're really unique, they give a cool style, they're also very situational. And there aren't very many times where I find myself wishing that I had an anamorphic lens for one of my mirrorless or my DSLR cameras, so I don't see why you would really want an anamorphic lens for the iPhone. Here's the way that I look at it. When you bought your iPhone 11 Pro series, or even if you bought the iPhone 11 base series, you bought a camera and you bought 2 or 3 lenses with that camera at the same time. Now, if we compare that to buying a DSLR or a mirrorless camera or a professional camera, whatever the case may be, you don't go out and buy a camera body, buy 2 or 3 lenses, and then buy a gimbal and an anamorphic lens. Those aren't the things that you think about when you're starting out with filmmaking. Those things just don't make sense. They don't add enough value to your production overall to merit purchasing early on. Maybe later, sure, but early on, they don't make that much sense. You would buy a tripod, you'd buy lights, you'd buy a microphone, you'd buy essential stuff. So here's my advice to you. If you're starting out as a filmmaker, or if you just want to create YouTube videos and you don't think of yourself as a filmmaker, regardless, I would say buy the essentials. Buy one of those cheap, weird ball tripods that everyone uses for vlogging off of Amazon. Buy one of those little Rode mobile microphones that you can plug into the, well, phones don't have audio jacks anymore, huh? You can plug in somewhere. But overall, that's kind of the point of this entire video, is to tell you that you really don't need a Moment Anamorphic lens, and you really don't need a DJI Osmo 3 gimbal. You don't need to be spending $400, $500 on a few small things to make your iPhone videos better, when you could take that $500 and put it towards some really nice studio lights. You could put it towards some really nice sound equipment. Whatever the case may be, I think that there are better ways to spend your money right off the bat as a beginner filmmaker or an early YouTuber than to spend your money on these kind of gimmicky things. Well guys, that's all I've got for you this week. Hopefully you got some value out of this video, or maybe even a tiny little bit of entertainment. Expect probably a couple of videos next week. With the whole circumstances right now that we're going through, I have a lot more free time. I don't have as many jobs. My part-time job is on hold right now, so I'm gonna be just kind of creating, and I hope you guys are too. So we'll see you out there.